Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker, on. We are going to have the much anticipated, long overdue Marvin Bagley debate because it's been in the, would you say that it's been like a percolating conversation over the course of the last week, Seth? Or I'm sorry, who the hell am I talking to? I'm talking to Cole. I've been talking to Seth Davis all day. So Cole, how's it going, buddy? And tell me, has that conversation been percolating?
It's going well, man. This is the first time in probably like 3 weeks that my DVR is empty for 20 minutes of college basketball. So that's kind of nice before it reloads tonight. But yeah, I think that Marvin Bagley conversation overall on Twitter and everywhere has kind of been an undertone. He's pretty divisive. So I think I come down somewhere in the middle. So it's going to be interesting to talk to you about it.
It's the weirdest thing that he has become this divisive player. Like, to me, he's very clearly incredible. I just don't understand why people would want to doubt him. I mean, he's playing right now. He's playing the incredible Pitt Panthers with good old fashioned stall ball, just failing across the board at Pitt. And he's got 13 and 8 at halftime, 4 offensive, 4 defensive rebounds. He's 0 of 1 from 3, 6 of 11 from the field. He's been every bit of what you expect to see from Marvin Bagley now. He's having a prototypical Marvin Bagley game as Duke just, runs Pitt off the fucking floor. I guess that we should start this conversation by, where do you have Marvin Bagley on your board right now?
I have him, I think, 7th. I go between 6th and 7th. Him and Jaren Jackson, I go back and forth between those two. And that's not an indictment of Bagley. Honestly, it's more of I really like the top of this class. I like the top 5 a lot. I like the top 7, top 8 a lot. It just comes down to, I need to see fit with him more than anything. That's what I look for, is with him specifically, is how he's going to be utilized at the next level. And if you can derive top 5 value from him in this class specifically. I think in most classes he's a surefire top 5 guy. Probably last year he's the 1 or 2 in that class. It's just this class specifically I'm really high on.
So I would say that you're low on Marvin Bagley if you have him at 7. Having talked to folks around the league, I think that you're low. You can even be high on this class and you can still be low on Bagley at 7. I've got him at 3. When I look at Marvin Bagley, I think this is probably the best place to start. I think he is the most certain, the person I feel most confident, I shouldn't say certain, the person that I feel the most confident will be an all-star out of this class. I just look at his incredible ability athletically, the fact that he has an incredible motor on the basketball floor. He has great touch around the basket, even though it doesn't look like he should have great touch around the basket, just given how flat the ball comes out sometimes around there, but it goes in. He has really, really good feet. He has the ability to take guys off the bounce. I don't really know where this complaint is coming from about his ball handling ability, but I find that bizarre. In general, I just look at him and I struggle to see how he's going to fail. He's too athletic. He plays too hard. He's never shied away from the moment at any level. He was playing against 30-year-olds and NBA players in the Drew League last year and was wrecking. This is a guy that is just straight up always going to produce to me. And that's what makes me think that he's the surest all-star in this class. Now, you can say that other guys have higher ceilings. I look at DeAndre Ayton, and DeAndre Ayton, to me, has the ceiling of a top 10 to 20 player ever, just because, holy hell, has there ever been a player built like DeAndre Ayton physically that has ever entered the NBA?
I mean, not in the time I've been covering the draft.
It's unbelievable. He's even more explosive than Joel Embiid, I think. Joel might have better fluidity with his feet, but some of the stuff that DeAndre Ayton can do is incredible. And that makes me think that, if everything went right for him, he is the kind of player that can lead you to a championship, just full stop. But with Bagley, maybe the ceiling is lower, but it's just hard for me to see how that guy fails. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if that's kind of the stance and the vantage point you're coming from, I get that. He's going to produce. He's going to score points. He's athletic. He's going to be all over the offensive glass. He's got great body control. He's not even being used as the dive man this year. I think he's only had 15 possessions finishing as the roll man and 8 rolls to the basket. So you're going to see an uptick in that for sure at the next level. He's a high-level finishing prospect, and you really have to tap into that play finishing to derive value. I think it comes, like the counter to your points come more as, how much is he actually going to contribute to winning basketball in the right setting? All-star, yes. He's going to put up numbers. He's going to be a 20 and 10 guy, I think, pretty safely. It's just when you get into the playoffs, you get into the highest levels of play, is he going to add value in valuable aspects of the game enough to derive top 5 value in this class? Again, most classes he's going to. It's just that's the vantage point I'm coming from, is he does have weaknesses. There are trade-offs with him. And if I don't know how he's going to be optimized, it's hard for me just to project him into the league and just in a vacuum. That's where I think we differed the most on. You're just looking at the production and saying this guy's going to be ultra productive. I don't see how he fails. I'm looking at it from the other vantage point of, I don't know exactly, like, his ceiling, is it really that high compared to like contributing value in aspects we know that are super valuable, like big man defense. That's a big issue with him. I'm one of the higher guys on his perimeter defense. Eventually, I think he's going to iron out the technique. But interior defense is a damn concern. I mean, he doesn't have that reactionary awareness, rotating still. He's not going to be able to grow longer arms. And I think he's actually built kind of more like – this might be another differentiating point. I think he's built more like a 6'9 guy than a 6'11 guy. He has a long neck, relatively wide shoulders. But honestly, I don't see him as a physically imposing – presence as far as his frame or anything like that. I think he plays physical, which certainly helps him, but I don't know. I just have reservations about his projection. But he's gonna be productive. He's gonna be a good NBA player, probably a great NBA player. It's just that highest level, is he going to contribute to winning basketball on like a competitive team?
So I do want to talk about that, but I want to bring up one more point before I talk about like kind of fit and the way that you kind of work around those issues, right? So we feel good that, you know, he's a relatively safe player to take, right? Like,
yes,
you would admit that?
Absolutely.
So when I look at other players in the NBA or in this NBA draft class, right, I think that there are more questions about those guys than there are about Marvin Bagley, right? Luka Doncic has never consistently faced the level of athletes that Marvin Bagley has. I think that's just fair to say, right?
Yes.
Michael Porter has the back issues. DeAndre Ayton, you know, has the background issues that we just don't know about. Like, you know, like we just don't know enough about him to know yet. And like, how much is that going to come into play? Mohamed Bamba just doesn't like play hard all the time. Like, do you think that's fair to say?
Absolutely.
Jaren Jackson just doesn't have the explosiveness athletically that Marvin Bagley has. Like, they're similar players, but Marvin's just way better at creating his own offense.
Fair.
You can make the case that Jaren's certainly a more instinctive defender, and I think that that's where you come from whenever you say that you kind of flip between those two back and forth.
Yes.
Colin Sexton might be a crazy person. Like, look at him on the floor. I mean, come on. You know, like there are people who swear by him, and, you know, that's great. And I think that he's a really, really high level prospect. He's definitely a top 10 pick, but that guy is the most hyper competitive player I think I've ever seen. And it spills over sometimes. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yes.
Trae Young, we've seen him the last 2 games that he's played, struggle to get offense efficiently. Now, he still puts up 30 points and 10 assists, but he struggles to do it as efficiently as he would need to. There are still questions about how much separation he's going to actually get at the next NBA level. And, you know, straight up, he's had a 15-game hot shooting start. We might want to let it kind of even out a little bit more before we start making grand proclamations about his game, even though I really like him and just had him at number 3 overall in my mock draft. Like, there are questions there too, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm a little more optimistic on his creating separation ability, just because he's still been able to do that in tough matchups. He hasn't finished well, and we know that finishing is going to be an issue for him. That was especially the case last night. But even against Javon Carter, I thought that he blew by him. Basically, whenever he decided to drive, he was getting separation. He just made a lot of poor decisions, forcing shots, and Carter is, again, probably the best perimeter college guard in the country. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
But
okay,
there are still questions about
Correct.
all these
Point
other
taken.
guys, right? Like, With Bagley, the fit questions aren't as important to me, I guess, as all of the other questions. All of the other questions are more about the player themselves, right? With Bagley, the questions are about the surrounding players, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So when I look at that, I think of it from the perspective of, okay, if I'm drafting high, if I'm drafting like 3rd overall, 2nd overall, 1st overall, and you're telling me that this guy is going to be just absolutely a 20-10 guy, which I feel pretty good about, like, that's a guy that I'm comfortable taking, just full stop. Like, I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay taking one of the best athletes that at 6'11" has ever come through the NBA draft process. I'm okay taking a guy that has a super high motor, that has incredible confidence in himself, that has never shrunk from the moment, that has never, he's just never failed. And I'm just fine with that. Like, I'm fine tying my boat to that, I guess.
It's reasonable. I'm not saying it's unjustifiable for sure. I mean, you can easily do that. You can make that case. I think a lot of it comes down to draft philosophy. Some guys like a little bit safer at the top with some kind of upside still. I mean, Bagley clearly still has upside, but he is safer as far as his projectability, his rebounding, just his effort level, and how he can sustain that, how aggressive he is. That stuff is going to manifest immediately into the NBA. If you're like the Grizzlies or something and you're in win now mode, that's a player that makes a lot of sense for you because you know he's going to produce right away. I think this is honestly a lot just a philosophy difference in drafting at the top for ceiling outcomes. You want those special players. Maybe we disagree about some of the skill sets with Bagley, but your vantage point as far as coming across as I know what this guy's going to do. He's super athletic. He has the mentality. I think that's the key with him too, is from what you've said, he's a really hard worker and he's going to put the time in to be better. That's huge. So if that is where you're coming from, I totally get your stance.
So, and then my next set of points here is going to be, okay, this guy's 18. He should be a senior in high school right now. Just straight up, like, you look at what he's accomplished so far and you look at what the semblance of his skills are already. It's not like he can't do anything for sure yet. You know, like, his block percentages are low because Duke plays him at the 4 and has him guard out on the perimeter. Like, I don't think that either of us would pretend to say that he just can't block shots. Like, at this level, at the college level, he could be a rim protector and be like a weak side 2.5 block a game guy, right?
Probably, yeah. I'm definitely more skeptical of that than you. I have not seen the rotational awareness from even when he's inside in the zone, like, even on the weak side, he's not rotating down enough. I think that Duke, I mean, we could talk about Duke overall as far as their defensive structure is horrendous. I think the guard play, none of their guards can guard. That's the most underrated part. Like, Carter gets killed, Bagley gets killed, but none of these perimeter guys can guard anybody. It just puts them like in tough situations consistently. But I also don't think that Bagley's been great in those situations. It's not a great situation overall for him, but even in the situations where he's had to thrive as a rim protector, I don't think he's fared well in those situations. Maybe he could be a 2.5 block guy if he's inside. I still don't think he profiles as a dynamic rim protector.
In the NBA, I would be surprised if he's a 2.5 block guy. But in college, I think that, you know, if he was inside as often as Duke should have him there, I think that I would feel pretty good about projecting that. Just given the amount of minutes he plays. Like, he's a 3.5% block guy. Like, I think he would double that at least if he was playing inside consistently. In terms of lateral movement on the perimeter, he moves his feet really well. He has some technical deficiencies, I think. Like, he sits down almost too far sometimes and just will, like, get himself out of position trying too hard almost to make the initial read. Does that kind of ring true to you?
Yes, I think that that's the most improvable part of his game. I think we've already seen improvement. I thought in the Florida State game, he actually defended on the perimeter pretty well. Still not great there, but that's the part that he has the movement skills. He has the feet. Just when he irons out that technique, the point you made in the past about maybe not being taught all these things, that's the part I feel the best about. Yeah,
like, defensively, he's just never been asked to do this stuff before. Like, that's just a straight up fact. Offensively, I think I have heard you say the ball handling thing. I'm confused by that. Can you explain why you don't think he's a good ball handler?
Okay, I do think he's a good ball handler if you profile him to the NBA 5. I think that's where you gain the agility advantage. I don't see the same control, the same fluidity and coordination with the ball. He's not very fast with it in the half court. He can definitely grab and go. I mean, we saw it even against Florida State when he got that steal, dribbled the length of the court, and dunked. He's capable in big spaces, but I think the ball really does slow him down a lot in the half court. Just watching him compared to other prospects, I think even Jaren Jackson is faster with the ball in the straight line than Bagley is, which is nuts to say. But I've watched both of them, and I've watched comprehensive tape of both, and Bagley's just not a fast dribbler. And especially when you get him in traffic, he's not super shifty. So it seems like kind of like nitpicking, but if you profile him to the 4 and he's in a specific role, if you put him in the Blake Griffin role, I don't think he's as coordinated as a ball handler as Griffin is. And he can't carve out the same amount of space because Griffin has a different kind of build. If you're going to make that comparison, there's a lot of different technicalities in that comparison that don't ring true. Overall, I think his ball handling at the 5 in the NBA would be a tremendous asset. At the 4, I don't know if it's good enough to project like high-level ball handling there. I think he's more like below average as an NBA 4.
Yeah, I'm just calling him a 5, to be honest. Like, I think he's a 5. So you bring up the Blake Griffin comparison, and it's one that literally happened in my mentions on Twitter earlier today. I think people are forgetting what Blake Griffin was at Oklahoma. Like, he was not a guy that like took dudes off the dribble like he does now. He was like the joke at Oklahoma was he just dunks everything, which is comical to say now, given how Blake has improved his game and has literally changed every single thing about the way he operates on the basketball floor. And I'm not saying that Bagley is going to do that. I don't know that. There are so few players over the course of the last decade that have done that. Like Paul Millsap's another guy that has done that. I would never project someone to be able to do that. But, like Blake is someone that had many of these same concerns coming out of Oklahoma. And people will point to the assist rating, the assist rate at Oklahoma for Blake versus the assist rate at Duke for Bagley. The thing about Blake Griffin at Oklahoma was that everything ran through him at Oklahoma. At Duke, not everything runs through Bagley. Bagley creates his offense through offensive rebounding, through straight line drives at the top of the key, through, post-ups. Like you said, he doesn't really do dive stuff to the rim. He's not always the main source of action. I mean, that's what happens when you have Trayvon Duval, you have Wendell Carter, Grayson Allen obviously plays a significant role there, but like Blake Griffin had the ball in his hands considerably more, and it just led to more assists because it led to the defense collapsing down on Blake more consistently.
Absolutely. And I think when I bring up that comparison, I'm going purely by the film, watching Blake back, even though he was a bit more raw in some areas with the ball, he just showed a tremendous foundational baseline of coordination, like quick spins. He just looked really natural with it at times. Of course, he got sped up a lot, had some bad turnovers. It is worth mentioning, though, that comparison doesn't really hold because Bagley is so far ahead as a shooter, too.
Yeah.
And that's honestly an area I'm not that worried about. I mean, I'm a little concerned about how it's going to translate to NBA range, but just mechanically looking at a shot, I think he's going to be fine there in time. I think that he has enough of a baseline where you could see him shooting threes in time. I think he's definitely going to profile pretty well on like pick and pop mid-range jump shots. I think that's going to be a really nice skill for him. So I'm not somebody that's fixating on the shooting with him even. I think that's been okay. Gets good arc. He's better on balance. When he can actually set his feet, he's okay. Again, I think it's more of mid-range right now than it's NBA, but in time, it's absolutely kind of a mechanical shot you can profile. And then the passing flashes he's shown on the move have been pretty impressive. I mean, they're not like, a lot of them aren't high-level passes, but it's good enough to where in bigger spaces at the 5 spot, like he's going to be able to pass out of the 5 spot on like a short roll. I'm pretty sure, especially over time, he's going to be able to make decisions there. So that's not really where my issues lie. If you're calling him completely a 5, then from a skill standpoint, I mean, he can probably in time even pull up off the dribble. He hasn't really done that this year. I think he's like 0 for 3 in the half court. I think he's hit 1 in transition from 3, but that might be a part of his game that comes too. If he's a 5, he's skilled. If he's a 4, that's where we might have a disconnect, is because I think that the skill level there isn't quite what I'd like it to be.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think he's a 5. Like, full stop. I just think he's a 5. Like, you look at the way Al Horford operates now. Like, I think Al Horford is a 5. Bagley is about the same size as Horford, right? Like, he's skinnier right now, but, Horford grew into his frame. I would imagine that Marvin Bagley is going to do the same. Would you think that's fair?
Yeah, I'm a little bit more skeptical of his frame. I don't know how to project these things that well. I mean, he just kind of seems smaller to me than what he gets credit for as a 5. Again, he looks to me more like 6'9", but he plays bigger than that. That's what I like about him, is he is physical. So in time, I'm not going to rule on how much weight he can add and how much strength he can gain. It's certainly within the realm of outcomes.
So here's going to be my kind of final thing here before we talk about your fit concerns. You just said that you're not all that worried about him moving on the perimeter, and you're not all that worried about the jump shot. You are worried about rim protection, and I think that's a fair kind of question to have. I don't know how great of a rim protector he's ever going to be. I think really he's going to have to go to the right place and learn how to challenge with verticality. Just because, the length isn't incredible, but if you can just put your body there in between a person and the basket and stay vertical, it's 6'11" with like a 7'2" wingspan, you're going to be fine. Just straight up. Like it's going to be hard for guards and wings to finish over you, and that provides value. You're not going to be Rudy Gobert, but you're going to be able to be valuable. So you feel like 2 of the 3 big deficiencies in his game, you're not real worried about them, and you think they're fixable.
Yes, I think they are fixable. They are possible for him to achieve. I'm not saying they're likely or certain or anything like that, but they're definitely within his range of outcomes.
So why are you worried?
Okay.
Let's just kind of jump into that.
If we're arguing outside of fit, let's just address one more argument before we get to fit, because I have a lot of questions for you here too. As far as anchoring on the glass, how do you feel like he can really anchor against these bigger behemoth centers at the NBA level as far as boxing out? Rim protecting, I mean, we've already talked about that. It's not just like going vertical, though. It's like some of these guards are going to be able to explode through him. He's not like a force. He's not 260 where he just put his arms up. He's not DeAndre Ayton where he can just put his arms up and he's automatically an impediment at the rim.
Right.
I don't think he's ever going to profile great there. So I think those are the limitations that I see. If he irons out the perimeter defense technique, we can kind of start building into, I guess, fit, because that's where it mostly comes down for me is if you put him in a scheme where, let's say he gets drafted by the Magic or the Celtics, right? And they already have the perimeter defense infrastructure where they can switch everything, and that's how you utilize him, kind of like a Julius Randle type, where that's his value, is you just switch everything on the floor, and that's your defense, which has some value. That's a kind of scheme where I could see him thriving in.
Yep.
But again, I like using historical, not necessarily like direct comparisons, because no player really directly compares to one another. But look at like Amari Stoudemire. That's a multi-time All-Star. He made an All-Star team even without Steve Nash in New York. That's kind of what I see him as far as utility-wise, maybe with a little bit like a higher motor, higher defensive ceiling, defending in space. So a really good player, right? But
I would call Amari Stoudemire a Hall of Famer for what it's worth. But
interesting. Okay, I think he was the 3rd best player in that Suns team, by the way, behind Nash and Marion. But that's just me.
I think Sean Marion should be in the Hall of Fame before Stoudemire, but during the peak of those Suns teams, I think Stoudemire was a better player.
God, that's so tough. I mean, because Marion was like one of the best connecting pieces like I've ever seen. If you watch his tape back, he's incredible. But if you put him in a scheme like that, where he's really optimized as a finisher, then I'm on board with you. I think that's the deal. It's just in a vacuum if we're ranking these guys. I feel less good about building around him without knowing what the infrastructure is first, if that makes sense.
Right. I think that's a really good point. So let's talk about the fit concerns. And I think that the best way to do that is by using specific teams. Before we do that, though, I want to just kind of mention here. So Amari Stoudemire, during like his Suns heyday, so from 2004 to 2010, averaged, let's take a look. It was 23, 9, and 1.4 blocks on 56% shooting. If you're getting that with Marvin Bagley and you take him number 1 overall, I think you're happy. Like just straight up. I think that you are ecstatic if that ends up being the scenario. Even if DeAndre Ayton ends up being like a top 10 player ever or something, I still think you're happy with taking Marvin Bagley.
Absolutely. And again, that goes back to philosophy of this guy has a safe, projectable skill set, and it's going to be valuable, especially if he's placed in the right predicament.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that that's where we're at. So I think that the fit conversation happens best by talking about specific teams in the top 5, right? So Atlanta, let's start with them. I think they're probably the most likely team to end up with the number 1 overall pick. The Hawks already have John Collins, who is like a lesser version of Marvin Bagley. I don't think John Collins is stopping me from taking Marvin Bagley if I think he's the best player in the draft. And they don't have enough roster pieces in place that will be there for their next winner, that if I think Marvin Bagley is the best piece, I'm taking anything to do with fit. You know what I mean? So I'm basically starting new with Marvin Bagley there.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. I totally agree.
Orlando gets tricky. Orlando is bad.
Okay, interesting.
Not in terms of fit. They're just a really bad basketball team.
Yes, they are.
I don't know. I don't know what they're going to look like. So they still have 2 more years of Bismack Biyombo. They still have at least 1 more year of Vucevic, but how much will they have of Vucevic? They already have Aaron Gordon and Jonathan Isaac in place, both of whom are 4s. What would you think of that fit, I guess?
This kind of builds into that concept I was talking about with just the Celtics and switching everything. I think if you played Bagley at the 5 next to Isaac and Gordon, and let's say that Gordon sustains his level of shooting from this year, and Isaac becomes a proficient corner 3-point shooter, and that is kind of the infrastructure you're building on defensively, where both those guys are pretty switchable, and you have some weak side rim protection from 2 other positions. I think that could be really interesting as far as just the front court fit overall. Would allow Bagley to play the 5. He could be the play finisher. The problem, of course, is who the hell is the point guard? I mean, that's the issue, is they don't really have a dynamic playmaker. That's why everybody's mocking Trae Young there. It's because they need that kind of player. And Elfrid Payton is not that kind of player. So that would be the issue for me, is I like kind of the infrastructure in the front court, but unless they have a dynamic playmaking guard who can kind of optimize Bagley, I don't think you're going to get full value for him.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. They're a tough spot because, they're such a bad shooting team too.
Yes.
That having a guy who is so good on the offensive glass might help. It might just create more opportunities for him. But I think I agree that if you're going to get efficient offense, you probably need. I think with them, I have no problem looking elsewhere than Bagley. Would you take Bagley or Ayton for them?
I mean, I just think Ayton's a better prospect, so I would take him in a vacuum for any of these teams probably. But for them, yeah, I mean, they're in such a stance where they don't really have any kind of avenues to be good. So why not just take the highest ceiling player, I guess, philosophically?
Memphis is sitting in 3rd right now, which is crazy. If you're the Grizzlies, I think we both agree the Grizzlies should probably just take Bagley, right?
That's the fit. I think that's the fit in the top 5 right now, where you look at and you're like, if Bagley goes to Memphis, I will move him up. That's the team, because they have Gasol. They can kind of invert that Amari Stoudemire dynamic, which I was going to touch on as well. So you have a unicorn type. You see the same thing, the same likelihood or possibility, I should say, with New York, with Kristaps, that kind of player where Bagley can be the play finisher, and Memphis has an awesome point guard. So that fit makes a ton of sense.
Oh my God. The Knicks, by the way, would be the absolute best fit for Bagley, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably the best fit for him, with Memphis being number 2.
Yeah. Just putting him next to Porzingis would be ridiculous. For Sacramento.
No.
That's hard. I don't know.
All right, give me your case for him.
So with the Kings, I look at what they have on that roster, and I don't know what's good and what's not. They already have their backcourt of the future, according to them, right? I'm not saying they have their backcourt of the future. I'm saying they think they have their backcourt of the future in Buddy Hield and De'Aaron Fox and Bogdan Bogdanovic and the young guys that they have. And they have George Hill, obviously, as well. It depends on how much you think of Willie Cauley-Stein as a building block, how much you think of Skal Labissiere as a building block. Zach Randolph, I don't think he's going to be there after this year. So, I don't know. I don't think any of those guys are stopping me from taking Marvin Bagley.
Oh, if that's your vantage point, absolutely. I was going more towards the other side of I don't want him to go there.
For his general sanity, yeah, I agree.
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, if you're trying to optimize these guys, that is not the setting. That's kind of what I was talking about, is putting him into an ecosystem, in a system where there's no infrastructure in place. It's just you're taking him and then putting him. I don't think that's, from my mentality, my standpoint, that's not the situation I'd want him to go to. But if you're Sacramento, sure. I mean, if you think he's the best player on the board, you take him. There's nobody on that roster that's mitigating that factor for me.
But also, too, if you're a player, if you're the Kings and you're looking at it, So yeah, like we look at it from the outside where we just assume the Kings are never going to be successful. I don't even know that I agree with that, but like that's the laughingstock joke, right? If I'm a person with the Kings and thinking that, okay, we're going to build this winner out, we have confidence in ourselves to do this, I'm pretty okay just taking a guy that is going to be super hyper productive, right? Like just take the guy that you know is going to be productive.
Sure. It's definitely defensible, and I have no idea what the Kings are going to be in the future. I'm just going by past circumstance as far as developing big players. It just hasn't gone well for them, and who knows if that's going to change. It's just for Bagley's sake, I'd want him to go to a better ecosystem.
The most interesting conversation to me happens with Boston. I don't know what I think of him going to Boston. I think it would be a really, really good fit. I think that he would probably be number 3. Just as he is on my board, I think he'd be number 3 for me there. They would switch everything. They would just use their length to contest at the rim and just their natural length with, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart. Al Horford would obviously start. Bagley would come off the bench. So, like, it'd be a really good fit there. But could they do better, I guess, is a good question. Like, does Mohamed Bamba fit them a little bit more?
I was actually on a Celtics podcast last night, and we had this exact conversation. And surprisingly, I went to the defensive end because they have all this switching, and you just need that kind of defensive rebounding, which they haven't had. I mean, that's been the criticism of Horford is he doesn't protect the rim in elite fashion. He doesn't defensive rebound.
They've been really good at that for what it's worth this year, though.
Okay. Yeah, so just historically, that's been the complaint. So my mind initially went to Bamba, and then they were like, no, we love the passing dynamic with Ayton or with Horford. And Ayton kind of profiles, I think, probably the best is like a high post facilitator. He's not like a high level passer, but he's shown enough there where I feel kind of good about his ability to do that. Do you think that Bagley could fill that role in time as like that 5 kind of dribble handoff guy, pick guys off from the top of the key? Do you see that kind of playmaking in his future? Like, is it likely?
That's a tough question. I think he's going to be able to do that, but I also just look at a kid that's 18 years old who can probably, like, I just think he's going to be able to do everything. I'm just at that stage. Like, okay, he's probably not ever going to be like this elite level rim protector, but everything else when it comes to skill set, he's just a hard enough worker to where I think he's going to figure it out. And whatever situation he goes to, he's going to kind of fall into the right, like, development cycle,
Yeah. And I think honestly, of all these bigs, Ainge is probably going to gravitate towards Bagley's psyche probably the most. Would you agree with that? His mental makeup?
I don't know enough about Ayton's to be honest. Like, I just don't know with him.
Okay.
I can see Danny Ainge being a fan of Marvin Bagley in terms of his motor and confidence levels. But like in comparison to I don't know that I want to make that statement in comparison to others. I just mean it in terms of who Marvin Bagley is. I can see Marvin Bagley being a person that Danny Ainge really likes from the perspective of working his ass off and never being afraid of shit.
That's exactly what I was getting at. I don't really know. Obviously, I don't know the mental makeup of someone like Ayton, but I can definitely see Ainge and like his brain doctor signing off on Bagley as far as just his approach and his likelihood of development with just his work ethic.
Dallas. What do we think of Dallas there?
Oh, I mean, if they're 6, obviously you take them. I mean, in that range, but yeah,
like say they end up with a top 3 pick. I'm assuming that all of these teams have a top 3 pick.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, with their system, they run a lot of isolation-based stuff, a lot of middle pick and roll for Smith. I think that Bagley-Smith pick and roll would be kind of devastating, potentially, if you had the requisite spacing around them. So I like that fit.
Chicago doesn't take freshmen. I mean, they took Lauri Markkanen last year, obviously, so I'm like making a joke, but like they take older players like all the time. I don't even know what to think of them.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes to how you think. I mean, at a certain point, if they think he's the best talent on the board, you take him. But it kind of goes somewhat to how good you think Chris Dunn's going to be. I mean, he's made steps this year as a playmaking guard. If you think that he can continue that and he's going to be a plus playmaking guy, be like a top 15 point guard in the league, you obviously have the other big offensively to stretch the floor that could make Bagley a tremendous finisher in that system. It's just kind of goes back to how you think that Dunn's going to improve and how you think that lineup can survive defensively. Just
in terms of fun, I feel like Chris Dunn, Zach LaVine, Lauri Markkanen, and Marvin Bagley would be like one of the most fun cores I can imagine.
That's fair.
The Cavs, A lot of it depends on LeBron, obviously. Let's say LeBron decides to stay and the Cavs have some sort of indication that will be the case. Do we like Marvin Bagley there as like a crashing offensive rebounder who's just like a freak athlete?
Yeah, I mean, he can play the 5 there, and they can really space the floor, and LeBron will optimize him for sure as a finisher. He finds those guys. We've seen what he's done for Tristan Thompson. That's a fine pick for them.
Yeah, I think it's a fine pick. Phoenix at number 9. I don't know. I don't know what their vision is right now.
Yeah, that's the tough one. They have front court pieces, but I don't think any of them is necessarily someone that you draft around. I think that, Bender's made strides. Chris has had like a nice recent game sample, but none of those guys really make you move the needle. Neither does Josh. So they don't really have the point guard unless you think Devin Booker's going to evolve into that kind of lead guard style player. But they are clearly still in the rebuilding mode. I think a lot of people would argue that they don't want to cut off the development of these guys. But do you really think these guys have the kind of ceiling that Bagley does? That's a tough argument. So
I'm going to ask this question. In what case would you take Marvin Bagley over DeAndre Ayton? I'm just going to run down the teams. Atlanta.
I'm going to answer it for you right now. I don't think there's a single team on this list that I would. Just being completely objectively honest. Like maybe Memphis.
You would for Memphis and probably the Knicks, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Definitely Memphis in the top. I wouldn't say definitely. I still think that Ayton's a better talent, but I think it's very justifiable for Memphis. I'll say that.
Okay, so I will answer. Atlanta, no. Orlando, no. Memphis, yes. Sacramento, maybe. Boston, maybe, but probably not. Depending on what they come back with Ayton's background and stuff. Like, if I was them, I would be hunting ceiling. And like, again, I think DeAndre Ayton is just the biggest freak I've ever seen on a basketball floor. Dallas, probably not. Chicago, they're a really tough one because I don't know if there'd be enough mobility with an Ayton Markkanen front court.
Yeah, that's a little tougher. I mean, I think that Ayton can really move his feet. So it just comes down for me is the rim protection, but you have the same concerns with Bagley there, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I would take Ayton if I was Chicago. Cleveland, if LeBron stayed, I would take Bagley with Cleveland.
So as the justifier being, he's probably more pro-ready right now. He can step in and get you points and rebounds.
Yeah, and I think that he wouldn't need the ball as much as DeAndre Ayton does, and you don't want to take the ball out of LeBron's hands, obviously.
Fair.
Phoenix, I would take Ayton. Charlotte, let's just hope Charlotte's not there because that would be sad. Okay, here's another one, though. Utah. Like, say Utah won the lottery.
I mean, obviously with Gobert, that makes it really interesting, and they already have spacing issues with him and Favors. Yeah, I think you'd have to lean Bagley there just because Gobert is so well instilled, and it's not like you're going to play Gobert and Ayton together.
And just for the sake of if they get number 1, because they get the number 1 pick if the Lakers get the number 1 pick, Philadelphia.
Oh, that's fascinating. I mean, they would have to trade the pick, right? Is there a good answer here?
I mean, well, the thing for Philly is that in their case, Luka Doncic is for sure on the board because they would have the number 1 pick. They probably just take Doncic, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%. If we're factoring him as well, I think that's easily the pick.
Yeah. So I think that there are more cases in terms of fit here for Bagley than what even I thought going in, but I'm sure than what you thought going in, right?
Probably, yeah. I still think I feel strongly about some. I'm not sure if I feel strongly enough about others, especially relative to other players in this class. Again, my argument is more like Bagley relative to everybody else in this class that I just feel really good about. I love the top 5, top 6, top 7 of this class. So I'm not saying Bagley's a bad player, but I have 2 quick questions for you real quick.
Yes.
So let's say hypothetically that Bagley gets played as a 4. Do you think he will ever be able to play kind of the playmaking role that Blake Griffin has with the Clippers as far as with Chris Paul, even this year without Chris Paul? Do you think he's going to be able to burden that kind of usage, facilitate for others, facilitate for himself out of the mid-post, for example? Do you think that's in his realm of outcomes?
I wouldn't predict it, but I think it's within the realm of his outcomes.
Okay. How heavily do you factor that into your analysis? Not very heavily as far as ceiling, or is that something you weigh?
It's certainly something I weigh.
Okay.
Much in the same way that I weigh DeAndre Ayton potentially becoming a top 10 player ever. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I think that you have to weigh ceiling outcomes. I think you have to weigh floor outcomes. I think you have to weigh, you know, the way that I think of this. Like, I've explained that on this podcast before. I think of this all as an expected value, like, you know, kind of theory or expected value problem to solve, right? Like, you know, do I think there is a 10% chance DeAndre Ayton is a star, 3% chance he's a top 10 player ever, you know, 20% chance he's a franchise player, like all that stuff, you know? And then like 20% chance he's like a bust. You have to weigh all of that. I think it has to come into your thinking somehow, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. Second question. Hypothetically, let's say that Bagley gets played at the 4 again, and instead he's in kind of the Aaron Gordon Orlando role, which means basically he's not a play finisher in pick and roll. He's more like the attack closeouts guy, posting up occasionally. Bagley will post up more than Gordon for sure, but mostly he's playing off ball and pick and roll offensively. Do you think that's worth a top 5 pick in this class if he's utilized that way?
I would answer yes, because I think that the general manager would get fired.
I see what you did there. That was well done.
I don't think he would get fired, to be honest. Like, I just think Bagley's going to produce wherever you put him on the floor. Now, the difference between production and producing on a winning team is very different. Like, I think Bagley's going to get numbers wherever he plays.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think eventually he would just kind of become a 5. Like to me, he is going to be a 5, be it next year or be it 3 years down the road. Like, they're going to figure out to play him at the 5.
Yeah, it's also important to note that he would get backup 5 minutes. Like, Gordon doesn't get those. Bagley would get those. So it's not a precise comparison. I'm just going for how guys are utilized in certain roles, which I really value, as far as you can only have so much value if you utilize like Aaron Gordon is this year. I mean, you're getting like heightened Aaron Gordon with that for sure, and that's more like Bagley's like maybe median outcome. I don't know. But just if you're an initiator, that carries incredible value, right? Because you're initiating the offense, you are playmaking for others and yourself. That's going to have a higher level of value. If you're a Joel Embiid type defender protecting the rim, that's going to carry incredible value. It's just on a winning team, it's harder to carve that out for Bagley. If we're just arguing purely on production, is he going to be a good to great NBA player? I'm in lockstep with you. It's just that part I worry a little bit about being misused and of his role not carrying the same value as a top 5 pick in this class.
Yeah, I value safety a lot. Like, I value what a guy is right now. It's why I was super high on John Collins, as we talked about last time. Like, I just value knowing what a guy is. Let's talk about other things, though. We'll do a quick news and notes section here. Brian Bowen is going to try and go to South Carolina. Why he is trying to go to the place, because, like, for people who don't know, Brian Bowen he's the guy who basically got Rick Pitino fired. It was alleged that he got paid $100,000 to go to Louisville, and he's now going to South Carolina, where Lamont Evans was also alleged to have taken bribes from Christian Dawkins. Why he's doing this and why Frank Martin is doing this, I don't know. What are your overall impressions, though, of Brian Bowen as a just general prospect?
Yeah, I haven't seen too much of him. Honestly, I saw him at McDonald's and then Jordan Brand Classic, so a very specific kind of setting. What stands out for me is just the intersection of size and shooting. He was pretty fluid with simple mechanics in those games, showed a little bit of shot diversity, shooting off movement, shooting on pull-ups. Looks like he has decent footwork. Decent athlete off 2 feet. Outside of that, I don't know if he has a great frame. Haven't seen enough of his ancillary skills, his passing, his defense. You're just not going to get that in that kind of setting. And he wasn't the best three-point shooter in EYBL. And it's not like he's a nuclear athlete off 1 foot. He seems pretty like maybe above average to me. And then he only has that reported 6'9" wingspan, so like a +2 wingspan. So not crazy as far as physique. So I'm a little bit more lukewarm on him than probably most people are.
Yeah, I think that, honestly, you're not more lukewarm than most people are. I think that that's basically the lockstep with most people that have seen him a lot. consensus top 20 prospect, has a long way to go. He's a scorer. He's a college scorer, though, more than like a fluid, surefire NBA scorer. The size, shooting, creation ability, the ability to score at all three levels. That's a really interesting package. He just doesn't really bring enough else right now, which is the scary part. Frank Martin would be an awesome coach for him, I think, to develop all of the rest of that stuff. But we'll see if he ever plays at South Carolina. I released my 2018 NBA mock draft. Was there anything that stood out to you?
I mean, the Trae Young, that's immediately where I go with mock drafts now, as far as what team do you think is the most likely to select him in the top 5? I think that's probably Orlando. What would you say?
I have a hard time deciding on the Orlando factor with Trae Young. The reason I say that is, so John Hammond and Jeff Weltman are the guys there right now. For people who know what those two guys value, you can go back through their draft history. They value length, they value athleticism, they value, high in terms of character as well. Trae Young certainly has the latter, but he's far from the former, right? So to me, he doesn't really profile as the kind of player that they would marginally think is more valuable than others, which is ultimately where you have to like figure out, what teams are going to take what guys. But he's just such a good roster fit. So I'm just like, this is what should happen,
Exactly. I think that's what I'm getting at too. I mean, they need, as much as it is interesting to say something like this, as far as needing attendance, needing somebody that can really play make, they've needed shooting for goddamn ever. So, I mean, taking Young would make a lot of sense. They just haven't had that kind of playmaker. And that's kind of the negatives of hitching your wagon to a point guard who can't shoot. And I like certain elements of Elfrid Payton's game, but, I mean, he limits your roster building. Where would you say you're like the biggest riser, or like you differ the most on if you're higher than somebody mock draft-wise than consensus? What picks do you think that would be? What players?
Probably. I'm still relatively high on Bruce Brown. Like, I've seen people have Bruce Brown like in 20s and 30s.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm with you. I think he's going to defend. He's shown adequate playmaking this year. I think he's a good passer. It just comes down to the shooting. If he shoots, he's going to be valuable. It's just, does he shoot? I
have Daniel Gafford in the top 20 right now, or like 21. I think that's probably relatively high for him. I think it's worth talking about him in conjunction with Robert Williams, who I have at 20, which is considerably lower than where I feel like most have him.
Absolutely. Yeah, Gafford is going to be a question I had for you, because I know you watched a lot of him recently. What are your thoughts there?
A really interesting player. 6'11", 7'2" wingspan, has the body to play in the NBA right now. Very, very bouncy. Has really good touch around the basket. Has a really good catch radius. Has pretty good hands from what I've seen. Good timing, blocking shots, and contesting. Really takes pride in defense. Like, really wants to sit down and contest and defend and do all that. That makes you a valuable player as a role player in the NBA. I think that's kind of where his, kind of ceiling lies, where his value lies. He's going to be a really good role player in the NBA, I think.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I've had him top 20 for a bit. I think he just profiles really well into NBA space. And he's an underrated passer, too. Like, that's something I went back and watched all of his assists, and he passes the ball a lot better than you'd think he would. Even skip passes out of the post, some stuff on the move. I think in time he can probably make a short roll pass, and he's explosive, especially when we can gather off too. And he really competes. I mean, he's got a high motor. There's a lot to work with there. I think he's probably more of a situational big. I mean, the rebounding numbers-wise looks okay, but when you watch him on film, he gets bullied a lot, even at this stage, more than you'd like. He doesn't box out. He's not like technically sound yet, but he's definitely like an NBA caliber athlete. I think he's going to be, at worst, kind of a valuable backup 5.
Yeah, to me, he's this year's like guy that's ranked somewhere in the like outside of the top 40, who rises into the first round and rises into like potential like a lottery spot. Like last year, it was Zach Collins. The year before that, it was Marquise Chris. The year before that, it was Zach LaVine, I believe. Or no, that was 2014. Who was the year before that? Was there anyone?
Nobody comes to mind
Devin
right
Booker,
now. Top of my head.
Devin Booker was like a top 30 guy. It was not like a super, super high level, expected to be one and done type. People thought he'd be at Kentucky for 2 years. He was only there for 1. So that's, with Daniel Gafford, I think he's that guy this year, and Robert Williams has just not gotten better. I don't think.
Yeah, he was just kind of silent in that Kentucky game. I mean, he had a couple of lob dunks, but like I don't know, like he's so inconsistent with even deciding to shoot. Like he's so passive now as a shooter, and the shot does not look great at all. So I think in NBA space, he profiles more as like a Jordan Bell type, like a situational five. He has better tools than Bell. Not quite the same level of passer. I do think he's a pretty damn good passer, especially in space. But yeah, I think that he's definitely more of a situational big where perhaps a lot of people came into the year. I know a lot of people had him top 7, top 8. I don't think he has that kind of ceiling.
Yeah, I had him at 14 coming into the year. I don't get it. Chandler Hutchison at 23, Lonnie Walker at 25, Landry Shamet at 26. I think that you are even higher on Hutchison than I am, right?
Yeah, I just watched a lot of tape of him recently and liked him for a lot of the reasons that you pointed out. The ability to attack closeouts, get to the rim with long strides incredibly quickly. He's one of the wings in this class that really can take like one dribble and explode off 1 foot to the basket, and he has agility. It all comes down to the shot for him. I think his efficiency numbers struggle because he shoots a lot of off the dribble shots that he's just not cut out for, and he has a lot higher usage than he will at the NBA level. He'll be used more as a wing, but there's a lot of playmaking allure there too. He's really improved as a passer, and there's just a lot to work on. I think that in this class, you kind of start running out of guys that are high level, like even rotation players around the late teens. Yeah. And I think he has an NBA skill set to me if he can shoot. He's an NBA athlete. He plays a coveted role. Or he has a coveted size position at the wing spot. So I just think that he deserves more attention in that area. Maybe not top 20 for everybody, but in that range. I think he's a first-round pick.
Lonnie Walker at 25 is considerably lower than where I feel like people have him right now. I have not been a fan of his this year, but he has extenuating circumstances. He had knee surgery in the summer. I think he's just coming along slowly, but he just hasn't been good. Like, he doesn't look like he's ready to go to the NBA next year.
No, that's more of a projection based on past abilities. I think he's defended on ball better than I expected. He's been pretty quick laterally. Off ball has been a different story. His jump shot hasn't gone in. I don't know about the handling yet. He just plays such a specific role just because of how deep Miami is with perimeter ball handlers. He doesn't get the same kind of usage that you'd like to see to project him confidently. I definitely get being more sour on him. I just get to a point probably late teens where I'm like, I've seen enough from him. His compact release, I think he can shoot NBA threes, and he can switch a little bit on defense that I would probably roll the dice on him, but I totally get the skepticism. 24
points over his last 5 games combined. That's not a little bit scary. Landry Shamet, I think I'm a little bit higher on him. To me, like, he just feels like a rotation player in the NBA. Like, he's a 52% three-point shooter who can defend. That plays.
I only have one reservation with him. I love him too. Is his flat arc sometimes. Like sometimes it's a really big tightrope, and does that extend to NBA range? Because if he doesn't have his shot, he's not like a dynamic slasher where he gets to the rim off the bounce. He's more of a cutter. He's a really smart off-ball player too, so he fits really well in like a motion type construct. Plays well in a team construct. It's just, can he shoot NBA threes? That's something that really got to be on the lookout for when it comes to private workouts. If you see him at the combine, I'm a little skeptical there, and that's the only thing holding me back from saying he's like a surefire like top 25 guy for me.
At 28, am I too high on Keita Bates-Diop? Is my Ohio State color showing?
I don't think so, man. Honestly, like his game against Michigan State, everybody's going to point to that now, but there's a lot to like there. I don't think he's as switchable as some people think he is. I don't think his feet are like next level. I think he's good, and he's got like a 7'4" wingspan or something like that. Is crazy length.
It's comically long. It depends on how tall he is now. Like, people at like Ohio State, I guess, or think he's like grown a little bit over the course of his time there, like since he was last measured. And he had like a 7'2" wingspan, I thought. So it was like +7, whenever he got to Ohio State. So I don't know what he's going to measure at, to be honest. But if he's like 6'8" with a 7'4" wingspan or like a 7'3" wingspan, and he can shoot like he can shoot, that's just like, I don't care if he's not a great athlete. Like, just take him.
I'm with you. I'm 100%. I have him in that range now, too. At the 4 spot, he becomes really interesting. He's shown a lot more offensively than I expected. Just mid-post fluidity as far as jab step, shooting over the top of like Jaren Jackson types. He has good touch. So if he shoots a 3, I think he can be valuable. I think he can protect the rim a little bit from the weak side, even though he's not a dynamic leaper. He's got really fast hands. You saw that in the Michigan State game with some of the steals he got. So, yeah, in that range, you just kind of take the measurables almost with the fluidity as far as being able to put the ball in the basket a little bit. If he can play the modern NBA 4, even if he's a backup, I think he's well deserving of that range.
Killian Tilly's a guy that I have higher than number 34, just on my personal board. I'm a huge fan of Killian Tilly, just as like a dude. He's awesome.
I agree. He won me over earlier this season just with his defensive intellect. I'm not exactly sure, like, what position do you see him playing? Like, if you were to solidify one, would you say he was a 4 or a 5 as far as a backup or yeah?
The thing is that he's so good defensively that I think you can play him with so many different types of players. Like, he's so good at verticality at the rim that even though he's not super long and super big, I think he's going to be an okay rim protector. He shoots the ever-loving hell out of the ball. He can really, really pass the ball. Like, there's just such a diversity of skill set there that I feel like it's all going to be fine.
Do you think he has starting equity?
5th starter if he is, but like maybe more of a rotation player. Got
it. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think if he can shoot, he's a high intellect player, and in that range, I'm totally on board.
Is there anyone else that stood out to you?
Not off the top of my head, honestly. I think we've covered all these guys. I kind of know where you come down on a lot of these players. Maybe do you have Dre Foster? I can't remember. Where did you have him?
I do. I have him at 48.
He's somebody I'm probably higher on. I've watched a lot of his tape. I really, really like him, knowing his background. I think he's a really high-level cutter in that SMU system. Yeah. Really knows how to move without the ball. He's physical. He has that football background, but he's coordinated. It comes down again to the jump shot, which I think mechanically is better than the percentages indicate. I know his free throw percentage is up to like 73 or 74% this year.
He hit like 42% last year, too. Like the percentages are okay on his jumper, I think.
Yeah, and I'm just a fan of him. I think that's kind of what the NBA is looking for right now, like a 6'6", 6'7" guy with a 7-foot wingspan, 220 pounds, plays a little bit more physical than his size, can protect the rim a little bit from the weak side. I've just watched a lot of SMU, and he's someone who's stood out to me. I think he's a first-round guy for me. I know that's higher than a lot of guys have him. I'm just a fan.
Yeah, like if you told me he goes in the first round, I would not be shocked. That's fine. Honestly, I probably could have put him in my top 40, and like, the more I think about it, the more I think he fits in the current NBA than Alonzo Trier, who I have at number 39. There's one more guy. I did not put Nickeil Alexander-Walker on here. I have not been impressed with him this year.
Yeah, I've had a really bad sample. Like, every time I watch him, he's a no-show. So I think he's had some good games that I haven't seen, so I got to go back and watch more of him. He's someone that I was higher on entering the year, and I definitely soured on a good bit, but he's not. I probably haven't seen him play in the last 3 weeks or so I really got to go back over his film.
Yeah, what I don't like is that he doesn't always play late in games because, like, Buzz just doesn't trust him, it seems like. That scares me. 50% from the field, 40% from 3, 76% from the line, averaging 12 points as a freshman. That's really good. Like, those numbers are great. He had a great game, too, against Pitt, but, like, let's throw Pitt out because Pitt is, like, a borderline basketball team. Radford, Maryland Eastern Shore, Kentucky Presbyterian, North Carolina A&T, Syracuse, Virginia. Over the course of those, I believe it's 7 games, only averaged 9 points a game and 22 minutes per night. Like, he shot well, but it's hard for me to get over the fact that it just does not seem like he's trusted when they could use someone like him.
Yeah, that is a concern. Where did you, off the top of my head, I can't remember, where did you have Shai Alexander now?
20s, somewhere in the 20s. I don't have it open anymore. But, like, I honestly think he probably is too low on this thing.
Man, he's been so impressive. I've only caught 2 out of the 4 games where he's really exploded, but some of the length extension finishes, like that horizontal length that he's shown, the craft with the left hand, if he can shoot the ball, I don't think it's a primary kind of guy. I don't know if he has quite the level of juice that you want from that position, but just as a system ball handler that can do a little bit of everything, really defends his ass off, back pressure with his length and pick and roll, all that stuff. I think he's really intriguing. I said last night that I still think that Knox is their best prospect, but Shai could easily be number 2 for me now over Diallo. I think that's a conversation.
Yeah, I tweeted similar last night. I tweeted, like, by the end of the year, Shai might be their best prospect. Like, I have Hamidou Diallo 13 and Shai Alexander 24 here. What the fuck am I doing? Like,
that's pretty great, dude. Oh, man.
I mean, like, Shai's just better. And it's not to knock Diallo. Like, I think Diallo's is like a first-round pick, but
me too.
What am I doing?
My last question for you. I tweeted last night, I think, that Trayvon Duval is how you pronounce it now. We're learning, not Duval, but Duval. Is it unreasonable to think he's not a first-round pick at all? Like, I just think that if you detach the name from the back of his jersey,
yes.
has he shown you that he's a first-round pick or not? No,
I don't think he has, to be honest. He just never learned to shoot. That's a significant problem with an NBA player now. The numbers are fine. He's averaging 12 and 7 a night or whatever. And, the true shooting percentage isn't good, but it's not like an abject disaster. It's like 52%, I think. The turnovers are kicking up, though. Like, you just look at what he does. He still gets more out of control than you would like. I can't get past the 17% from three in the mechanics. To me, he's more of a change of pace backup than a starting point guard in the NBA.
Yeah, me too. And the film is just not convincing as far as his ancillary skills. His decision making is really crashed down to earth. We talked about that before, but even the other night against Florida State, he was throwing passes in transition. They'd have Grayson Allen on the strong side corner, and he'd try to skip the ball to the other side and throw the ball 5 feet behind his player. And his accuracy is really deteriorated. And his defense has been bad too. His transition defense sometimes is just horrendous, and you just can't afford those kinds of shortcomings if you're not bringing any kind of shooting equity. Because I honestly don't think he's an elite athlete. I think he's a really good athlete, but I don't think he's any kind of uber athlete. Even in open court, he'll jump off one and he doesn't dunk sometimes, and it's you have a 6'10" wingspan, dude. Dunk the ball, and he just doesn't do it. So right now I have him, I don't know, maybe low 30s, 40s somewhere. Is it completely unreasonable to take a Jalen Brunson over him?
I'm here. You could just flat out think Trayvon Duval is not an NBA player because of the shot, yes. I guess. If you think Jalen Brunson can be a backup and you think that Trayvon Duval is just never going to shoot, sure, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at. I just think that Jalen Brunson profile is pretty cleanly into the NBA as a shooter and decision maker. And if you don't think that Duval can ever shoot, is he really bringing enough outside of just open court athleticism? He's got a great handle, so we got to give him credit there. But outside of that, is he bringing enough value to say you'd take him over Jalen Brunson?
I think he's pretty damn close to an elite level athlete, to be honest. The shot, it's hard for me to get past the shot. He looks like a guy that, if he can ever learn to defend, he's at least going to get you out in transition. He's going to get you easy baskets, but that profiles as a backup. It doesn't profile as a starter to me.
Agreed.
You did not watch the North Carolina State game, it seems like, from our conversation tonight with Duke.
No, I did.
And you pointed to Florida State as bad decision-making for Trayvon Duval?
You know what I meant to say? I think I meant to say North Carolina State instead of Florida State, so I was using those interchangeably.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I meant North Carolina State.
The NC State game was a mess.
Yes, that's what I was getting at.
It's hard. I have him at 22 on this board. It's difficult for me to have him any higher than that. Could you take Kyrie Thomas over him?
Yeah, if we're talking about guys in the 20s who can fill a role in the NBA, I don't think Kyrie Thomas is the most laterally gifted. I think he's really good there. He's not an elite quick twitch guy, but profiling into the NBA, he's a guy who's gonna guard. He has great technique, and he's probably gonna shoot threes. So doesn't that fill a more valuable role?
I think it does. Yeah. The last guy that I do want to talk about here, I didn't put Jontay Porter on my rankings. I'm just not a fan of Jontay Porter, to be honest. You are. I think it's probably worth asking why you're a fan of Jontay Porter.
I'm a lot higher in the shot than you are. I know we had this conversation via text. I can't remember what game it was where he was horrendous. It was the worst game of the season. You texted me and you're like, this guy's not any good. And I was like, you're just doing the Ryan McDonough kind of scouting approach. That was the worst game he's played so far. But I think his shooting mechanics are really great, honestly. He's got the inputs there. I think he's probably mid to high 30s now from three because he was 5 for 7 in one of his recent games. But just as mechanically, I'm a fan of his poise and his kind of passing and his fluidity, his IQ on both sides of the floor. I just don't see that from 18-year-old big men. I think he's really good there. of course he has limitations athletically, and that's why I'm not as high on him as some other people are who think he has like dynamic starter equity. He's more of a rotation big for me, but I do think that he has enough skill level, enough IQ, if he learns defensive positioning, which frankly he's already pretty damn good at, that he can be an NBA player in a backup setting, and you're going to find certain matchups that he's valuable in. So that's kind of my argument with him is there are skills. You get to a certain point in the draft, you're looking for rotation guys. I think he can fill a role. A lot of it goes to how much you buy the shooting, though, and I think I'm a big fan of it.
The last guy, what the fuck do you do with Marcus Howard?
Oh, God.
Like someone asked me on Twitter, like, what kind of prospect is Marcus Howard? And I was like, I know he's some sort of NBA prospect. Like, I think he's talented enough to play in the NBA, but I can't put a number on it. Like, I can't rank him. I don't know where the fuck to put him.
Yeah. I'm not the one to consult with that. I'm the same way. So somebody said, like, G League Stephen Curry or something. I'll roll with that. I mean, it just comes down to he's not going to defend. You know, he lacks burst, but that guy can shoot, like you would say, the ever-loving hell out of the ball. Like, that's his deal. I mean, he's a shooter.
Oh, my God, that guy shoots the shit out of it.
He's going to make a summer league roster for sure, and he's probably going to play well in that. So we'll see.
You know what the other thing is, though? This year, he's finishing at 58% inside the arc. Like,
Interesting.
He's been, like, a good finisher inside this year. He's been scoring all over the court. I don't know, man. He's 51 of 51 from the foul line, too, which is hysterical.
Good God. I went to Marquette for law school, so I should probably watch more of Marquette. I've only seen like one game of theirs this year, but I did catch the highlights of that. What was it, 52 points or whatever? That was insane.
He's nuts, man. Like, I think he's like a top 50 prospect. I really do.
It's not unreasonable. I mean, when you get to that point, you're just looking for NBA skills, and yeah, he has one.
Like, he's a better shooter than Trae Young.
Yeah, I think that's pretty arguable, man. I don't know. Like, in an NBA setting, is he? But in a vacuum, he is, for sure.
Yeah, like, I don't think he has Trae Young's vision and ability to create separation, but, like...
Oh, for sure.
In terms of, like, just pure jump shooting from 35 feet and in, I think he's a better shooter than Trae Young.
Jeez.
Like,
yeah.
I don't know what to do with him. He's insane. He's now taken 315 field three-pointers, and he's hitting them at 47% over his 2 years. And he's like 2 years younger than Nick Richards. He's 18.
I think right after this podcast, I'm going to check and see how many NBA threes he's made and what his percentages are in that. I'm really fascinated by that.
He's bizarre. He's insane. He's so good. And he's like I said, he's so young. He's 6 months younger than Trae Young.
That's insane.
Like, yeah, I don't know. Cole, tell the people where they can find your work.
As usual, at thestepian.com, I just wrote a piece analyzing the Trae Young, Javon Carter matchup, so I did a bunch of clips with that. I'm going to come out with a Chandler Hutchinson piece later this week, probably tomorrow, about featuring his a closeout ability to attack closeouts, that speed that we talked about earlier. And I also go on the Ode to Odin NBA Draft podcast once a week, so check that out as well, and that's all I got.
Go follow Cole at colezwicker.com, or Cole Zwicker on Twitter, not colezwicker.com. Your website used to be NBA Cap Strategist. It wasn't even ever colezwicker.com. What am I doing? It's been a long few days. Please remember to subscribe to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. We'll have another podcast later this week. I don't know with who yet. We'll see who I feel like getting on at the end of the week. But until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.